Okay, Kone Lingua, who I think was the founder of this subreddit, asked a question about a couple articles, one by Steve Reece and one by William Ross, published recently, which find a remarkable parallel between a verse in the Gospel of Luke and a couple of fables from the Aesopic corpus that seem to randomly coincide with each other. So first of all, thank you for founding this subreddit. I'm sure you're pleased with how well it's been doing. I visited the academic biblical subreddit years and years ago, and I remember you being there, and so congratulations and thank you for doing that. Yes, I definitely do mention these articles, and I'm going to share my screen real quick so that I can point out exactly where I mentioned them actually on multiple occasions. Let's see. But here is one of them. So I'm on page 248. So this is the first chapter of book 2, toward the end of the chapter, where I talk about, apart from the fables themselves, where we find Aesop and fable tradition appearing elsewhere in the gospel itself. And as Kone Lingua points out, both Ross and Reece, who published articles almost simultaneously, as you mentioned, notice that there is a particular line that Jesus utters upon his resurrection, which is only in Luke. O foolish ones, and slow in heart to believe in everything that was spoken by the prophets. Well, as it turns out, this opening phrase, being with ho ἀνόητοι, βραδεῖς te καρδίαια, is found in two variants of two fables. I don't know if I have the numbers exactly right, but yeah, it's found in two fables. And that verse, it scans as a line of iambic trimeter. You can see right here. So in other words, Jesus is speaking in a verse here, which is also already a bit peculiar that Jesus is speaking in verse. But then this also has parallels with a line in the fable corpus. So iambic is the most close, is the speaking, the verse, which is closest to normal speaking, which Aristotle already says. But it's the combination of things, that it's not just him speaking one line in iambic, but it's this kind of poetic verse itself. And the overlap with the fable tradition is certainly curiosity pricking. Now, Ross and Reece, and how they both had these articles in the same year, I think, something's fishy about that. So I don't know if one of them copied from the other somehow, but they actually disagree on the direction of dependence. Is Luke copying from a fable, or is the fable copying from Luke? And from a purely dispassionate point of view, either could be the case. So you can make a good argument for either. One reason why I think is in favor of it being Luke copying the Aesopic tradition is that this is just one of a cluster of Aesopic connections that have been popping up in scholarship within the last, say, 5 years or so. So this being one great example. And as I note here, a heap of scholarly skepticism is due for finding a new quotation of Jesus in 2016. But another more recent article than that, by, let me see if I make sure I get the names right, Margaret, Froelich, and Phillips, New Testament Studies, titled Throw the Blasphemer Off the Cliff, looks at the Lucan episode of Jesus preaching in the synagogue, and then the crowd, after he commits blasphemy, attempts to hurl him off of a cliff. As Froelich and Phillips point out, this is not historically plausible because there are no cliffs in the area. And they suggest like the closest parallel to this is in fact in the life of Aesop, which is how Aesop is killed in the end. He's wrongly convicted of blasphemy and is thrown from a cliff. And these are both L material. So this is all material found uniquely in Luke. And then you start noticing other uniquely L material that has odd fable connections. So another example is Jesus zoomorphizing people, turning them into animals. So Herod is the fox. This is again only in Luke. And of course, in Acts, Jesus tells Paul to stop kicking against the goads, again, turning him into some kind of an animal. So it's not just that the fables themselves have this obvious fable connection, but there are also several other points of contact in the Lucan special material. How exactly that took place, who's to say? But I think it certainly lends support to this not just being something unique to the fables, but also perhaps something broader in Luke's project. So yes, great question. Thanks for pointing out those articles. Definitely important. And this is again in chapter 8 where I'm discussing this. So you can also check that out too. So wonderful question. Thank you.